Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. This is your host, Darren here, and today we're going to have our first Canadian business school on the Touch MBA podcast. So I'm super excited to have our next guest on the show. He is Praveen Muruganandan, who is the Director of Admissions and Recruitment at the Schulich School of Business. And Praveen is the perfect guy to talk about the Schulich MBA because he graduated from the program in 2007 and worked for the school for a couple of years before becoming the Director of Admissions and Recruitment for the past one and a half, 2 years. So I can't wait to learn more about this program. Welcome to the show, Praveen.
Thanks, Darren. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. So my first question, Praveen, is what makes the Schulich MBA unique?
It's a good question. To me, I think there's three areas that I really would focus upon when I think about that. And I think it's the global reach, our innovative programming, and our diverse perspectives. And, when you think about sort of the reach of Schulich, we brand ourselves as Canada's global business school. And in that, we have exchange partners in 50 different countries around the world. And we have students represented from about 35 countries in the classroom. And the great thing about Schulich is after you finish, we prepare students to not only, work in Canada, but we also prepare and we hope students will, lead elsewhere, lead in large organizations around the world. And we have alumni represented in sort of 90 countries around. So if you're looking for an opportunity, or if students are looking for opportunities to live and work abroad, the Schulich MBA is definitely going to help facilitate that. Another part that I would sort of also sort of strengthen or sort of remind or sort of focus upon is innovation in the program. And while we're focused on the MBA program, I know we have other programs like our international MBA program as well, and some one-year programs that we can touch upon at some point if there is interest and time. But the one thing I like to talk about when it comes to the innovation and what makes the Schulich MBA really a unique experience is that we have something called a strategy field study, which is built in part of year 2 of the program. So traditional MBA programs follow a 2-year format, or in Schulich, a 16-month to 20-month format, depending on whether you do an internship. The first 8 months, students can complete the core classes, so finance, marketing, accounting, and so forth. But in year 2, students have an option to specialize in up to 2 areas, and they can select from about 150 electives. But more than that, and this is where it gets interesting, they spend about 6 to 7 months working with a company. And so typically you'll have a class or a group of 7 or 8 students where they have to find a company and then provide a strategic plan for this company. So they will study and work with the company over a span of, again, 6 to 7 months. And at the end of the project, they'll actually have to present to the president or the CEO of the company their findings. And to me, this is one of the best parts of the program, one of the most challenging aspects of the Schulich MBA program, but definitely a very rewarding experience. And, through that experience, you really also get to appreciate sort of the diversity of the students that are in the program, particularly because students come from sort of all walks of life. And you can have engineers, you can have doctors, lawyers, accountants, teachers, musicians, all in the classroom or all in a group trying to give or provide their own specific perspective on how to solve or how to find problems when confronted with different situations. So to me, when you think about sort of the Schulich MBA and what's so unique about it, I think about the global aspect, the innovation in our programming, and of course, the diversity within the classroom, not only from sort of the ethnic backgrounds that students sort of come from, but also from the professional backgrounds as well.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit more about the difference between Schulich's MBA program and Schulich's IMBA program? IMBA meaning International MBA
Yeah,
program.
sure. Sure. So the programs offer some similarities in the sense that both programs have core classes and both programs offer similar electives that students can pick from. And in fact, students who are in the IMBA program can study with students in the MBA program in year 2 of the program because they'll be taking the same types of electives. But what the IMBA program does, and I guess students who speak a second language, and really, if you speak a second language, the IMBA is a program that it's definitely it's a one of a kind. It's been around for a long time. We're the first program in Canada to sort of develop sort of something this elaborate. And what happens is the first 8 months, you're learning all the same core classes that the students in the MBA program learn, but from an international perspective. So you're learning how to manage with the intent that you're going to be working abroad at some point or for an international organization. It's not to say that with the MBA you cannot do that, but with the IMBA, it's focused in preparing students with that intent. The other aspect of the IMBA, which is really unique, is that there's also a work term or a work term that happens in the summer. So after the first 2 terms, when students finish their core classes, they will have a work placement. And that is something that is really, really important because you can work anywhere in the world and have that opportunity to hopefully be working in the language that you're in the second language that you can speak in or that you're fluent in. So typically if a student is, let's say if a student is from Toronto and they're interested in the IMBA program, they may speak a second language like Spanish. And so by speaking Spanish, you may want to go either to Europe or maybe an area of Latin America to do that work term. And that work term is actually not optional, it's a requirement of the program. So our students have to pursue that. And there is support and assistance from the IMBA office, where we have a dedicated office and a professional from the Career Center who works with each student to help them with that. And if you don't do that work term, you don't get the degree. So our placements are the students who are in this program have been able to secure an employment opportunity. And our sort of placement rate in that is 100%, or their placement rate in terms of the students finding opportunities is 100% over the last 5 years. So it's very good. It's something that I think if you're thinking about relocating for work, the IMBA offers some really great benefits. Traditionally, when people come to do an MBA, they're thinking about a change in a career or change in sort of a functional area within their organization, perhaps, or maybe even looking at accelerating their career and just moving to a higher level. But the IMBA also offers the opportunity to change the location and sort of relocate and work in an environment that you may not be familiar with all the time. So, and that's a big challenge for lots of people, lots of students, and the IMBA I think is a great great program to help leverage that.
So, would it be safe to say that the majority of your Schulich MBA graduates end up working in Canada, whereas the majority of your IMBA graduates end up working outside Canada?
I think a lot of them will start in Canada, particularly with the MBA students. Yep. And but many have moved on. And, when we have alumni represented in sort of 90 countries around the world, they're not all IMBA grads. They're actually, a lot of them are MBA grads. So, sometimes people will come and, particularly with international students, they will want to live in Canada for a few years and get that Canadian experience or North American experience. And then many times they will return to their home country and continue with doing business where they're comfortable, but because they've had that experience in Canada or North America, they're able to leverage that, further.
And the size of the programs, roughly how many students are in the Schulich MBA and the Schulich IMBA?
So we have approximately we admit about 250 students into the program sort of in the fall. And typically for the IMBA, we may have about 35 to 40 students a year who come in. So it's a competitive process getting into the program, but the IMBA is a smaller program because one of the main reasons why people may choose the MBA is because there's more flexibility in the sense that you don't have to do the work term. You can study part-time or full-time. Whereas in the IMBA, you're in a cohort for the first 8 months. And then after that, you have all the choices after you finish that work term. But, typically the MBA is generally the one that is attractive to lots of students, but the IMBA is something that I always speak to, particularly to students who speak a second language. I encourage, and who are not bound by any commitments or are looking for who don't require the flexibility and are okay with staying in a full-time cohort for the entire duration of the program. The IMBA is a great fit.
And is the Schulich Business School particularly reputable in any discipline?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny because we have 19 areas that you can specialize in. So, is there a specific area? I can tell you a lot of students do come with the interest in finance, an area of finance, and 30% of our graduates will pursue a career in finance. But having said that, I think strategy is a big part of what is most important within the MBA program here at Schulich. And I'll say that because we don't just talk about the course and talk about different principles and so forth, but when you have that experience in year 2 where you're spending 6 to 7 months, or really it's 8 months, 2 terms working together with the group and a company and having to come up with a strategic plan, that is a very challenging experience. But you're able to look at a company that you may have no knowledge of in terms of an industry, really get familiar with the industry very quickly, and then be able to come up with a reasonable plan to share with the with that environment, or with the president or the CEO, and that's a very interesting experience on its own. But I think that to me is sort of shows or demonstrates the value of what an MBA can offer. And when you're thinking about an MBA, it's really about strategy, and all these other aspects are important, but thinking strategically about how to not only solve, but to find or identify problems are key.
And, I'm sure you might get this question a lot, but, Schulich has been ranked top program in Canada by, a few influential publications like The Economist and Forbes.
Yep.
But why should candidates get their MBA in Toronto and Canada versus the US?
Rankings are really important, but I think it's where you start. For any candidate, I think it shouldn't be where you end. And I'll explain that in the sense that it's sort of an opportunity to be interested in a program, but you've got to explore the details of what Schulich offers and what a school in Canada can offer versus school in the US. Aside, I've lived in Toronto for a very long time, so for me, I might be biased at times, but Toronto's a big market. In North America, it is the 4th largest city behind New York, LA, and Mexico. But Toronto also offers some great experiences from a business standpoint. We have our banking sector is strong, and so during the recession or sort of the economic crisis, Canada really performed quite well and was able to maintain stability. And I think that as a person who's interested, or as a candidate interested in an MBA program, if you're thinking about working in Canada, one can be sure that this is a very stable economy to do business and to work and survive and thrive in Canada itself. But, when I think about the city of Toronto, the great part about the city of Toronto is that 45% of our population is born outside Canada. So, for an international student, for somebody who's never been to Canada, you don't need to feel like you're away from home for too long, because I think, there's great cultural experiences, there's great cuisines that one can, try and sort of find that would be very close to, your own home or your own sort of comfort zone as well. So, to me, I think that those are really attractive aspects. Finally, the most important part, I think, is our immigration policy. It's very, very progressive in the sense that students who opt to pursue an education in Canada can, and in particular if it's a 2-year degree, can benefit from having a 3-year postgraduate work permit upon graduation. So that's a great piece, because they can work in Canada for up to 3 years, and in that time apply for their permanent residency. So it gives them an opportunity to start that process to be a Canadian citizen if they wish to be.
And if we can now talk a bit about your admissions process.
Sure.
What are the key qualities you're looking for from Schulich MBA candidates?
To me, an ideal candidate is somebody who is not only outstanding sort of from an academic standpoint, but also provides something exciting about them in their profile that I want to know who they are outside work. And an ideal candidate, at Schulich is somebody who's going to not only be committed in the classroom, but is going to come and learn and expect to learn, but also to come and contribute and share his or her experiences to his or her peers. And I think that's really, really important, because when you're pursuing an MBA, it's not only about what can the professor or faculty member teach you, it's about what can you provide back in the classroom. And so we're looking for candidates who have, had an interesting life and who have some great stories to tell. And, at the end of the day, when you're looking at, or sort of when you graduate from this program, we want people who have a passion, who can walk away and say, I'm doing something that I really value, and it never feels like work. And I think when you do something you value, it doesn't feel like work, right? So the ideal candidate to me is somebody who comes in with passion and is very sort of committed, and not only to learning in the sense of receiving, but also to sharing his or her experiences.
Yeah, and I love that you're looking for people that are exciting, that are willing to share their experiences, that are committed. Would you have any tips for candidates who might say, well, how do I show that in my application? How do I tell the personal side of my story when I'm applying to business school? And, of course, business schools want to see a focused candidate as well.
Absolutely.
So would you have any tips there on how they could potentially show those exciting and personal sides of themselves?
I think in the essay questions, sometimes it's tough because people always relate their examples to their professional side, which is quite normal, and it's expected for the most part by an applicant, and many schools may look for that. We will look at that, and we even actually ask a question in our application where we want students to talk about sort of things that are different, or sort of extracurriculars, or things that they've involved with in terms of leadership. And that's really important to us, because we are looking obviously to give students scholarships and opportunities. And so if there's an opportunity to give, certain scholarships, sort of top scholarships, we're looking for candidates that, stand out from the page, off the page, basically. And so, there's a few ways. I think one is obviously through the application, it somehow comes through. The resume is a place that sometimes people get very caught up on all the professional aspect, and they don't think about the extracurriculars. And I'm not expecting that the resume should be 12 pages, but within a 2-page resume, it's very easy to sort of at least leave a little space there to talk about some of the hobbies and the interests. Because as an interviewer, when I'm asking the questions, or my colleagues are asking the questions, we're going to read all of that. And then when we do the interview, at some point through the process, we will have an opportunity to ask a candidate to tell us about a time, or tell us about that experience when they've maybe done some volunteering or some leadership experience, or if they like to swim or kayak or whatever it is that they like to do, to talk about those experiences. And it's not just about doing those things, it's about finding ways to take initiative and to be involved with leadership experiences within that. And that's, in fact, for students who come to the program with 2 years of work experience, a lot of the leadership they have may not actually come from work. So it's often have to leverage that leadership from the parts of one's personal life, which will help strengthen the application to the Schulich School of Business.
And can you walk us through the life of an application? So what happens between the time an applicant clicks submit and the time they hear back from you? I see that you have 2 deadlines per each intake, an early and a final deadline.
Yes.
So could you walk us through that process?
Yeah, I mean, what happens is we have an early deadline. The purpose of the early deadline really is to allow students an opportunity to submit their application early. And when we're evaluating for scholarships, we're able to look at, or sort of give more, exposure. At least those students who apply earlier will be presented to the scholarship committee earlier, or at least in the first round. And that obviously is an advantage for applying earlier. But sort of the way the application process works, once the student applies to the program, and once we've received the application, we're going to go through the different aspects of what is expected. And so, people will always ask the question, what's the ideal GMAT score? What's the GPA, and so forth? And much of that stuff, we have that on our website. It's clear, but people always want some reassurance. And one of the things I always tell students is that's not the only aspect of the application. It's one of the aspects. But the thing is, we'll look at all of those. So we'll look at the GMAT, we'll look at the GPA. But those things actually, we may not even see until we actually have read the essay questions. So the resume and the essay questions are probably the first things that we all look at. And so those things really have to be quite strong. And, when I think one of the key things that somebody can do when they're preparing their application, at least with the resume, is treat it like you're applying for a job. And when you apply for a job, you always want to customize your resume accordingly. And so, when you're applying to the Schulich School of Business, tell us why you want to study here and make sure that you're very clear about that. So from an admission standpoint, we're looking at that resume, we're looking at those essay questions, and then we look at the GPA and the GMAT, of course. And if we feel like a student meets the criteria in the sense that they have everything that we're asking for, and they also, from looking at that resume, we feel that they're a good fit for the program, then what we're going to do is we're going to invite the student for an interview. At that point, we will interview the student, and if everything looks strong, we will then take the file to an admissions committee for further review, and we will present that case or the student's file to the admissions committee. The admissions committee will then review the case based on sort of the feedback from the admissions director, and will then make a decision. And so it's sometimes a detailed process, but it's a very thorough process because we have people, our admission staff, obviously looking at the applications, but we're also having faculty and current students who are part of that process to see if each student who is selected for this program is the right fit. And we want to create a program that, we get the best students from all different places around the world, but also different parts of different fields to come in and really be complementary to each other in the classroom. So it's a very thorough process, but once it goes to the admissions committee, and if a student's file is approved, then we will send out an offer of admission to the student. And if it's not approved, if there was something in the file that was not strong, we're always happy to speak with the student or the candidate about his or her application, and if there's an opportunity for them to improve that over the next year or whatever it is, then we always encourage that and encourage somebody to reapply if they're intent on coming to Schulich.
And the interviews are carried out by yourself or your admissions team or faculty or second year students you mentioned?
At the moment, most of our interviews, if not all, are done by our admissions team. So myself or our assistant directors will do most of them. We do have occasionally some faculty members who will host a few interviews as well. So we do have people, depending on the regions in terms of where they're traveling. If we have an opportunity to travel to a specific city, we will interview candidates, and sometimes our faculty will be there to do that. So it's a great thing because faculty also have an opportunity to know which students are coming into the program sort of at a very early stage. But we have a criteria, so it seems to work well for us.
Okay, yeah. And would you have any tips for the interview stage? I mean, things that candidates should be aware of.
Absolutely. It's a funny question because it's not funny. It's a good question. It's a question that I get a lot of times about how to prepare. And the interview is really, really straightforward, but yet there are times that we see people do things that really they probably shouldn't be doing. So to avoid doing the things that you shouldn't be doing, I think the one very easy thing to do is just be yourself, but be professional. Remember that, again, if this is a job interview, you want to dress up and come for the interview and be professional and be ready to answer the questions and be able to ask questions as well. Second thing, though, is do some research. I think it's very important for the candidate to know what they're doing or why they're coming to this program. And we realize that students are applying to multiple programs, but if the Schulich School of Business would like to interview a candidate, we hope that students will understand and remind themselves of what it is about Schulich that they're inspired to pursue. Because sometimes it happens where students don't realize or forget sort of the key attributes of a specific school, and then they just sound generic, and that's not the best thing to do. And once the interview is complete, I think sometimes which is also very helpful, is stay connected. I think it's very important, once the interview is finished, or even while you're in the application process, to remember to be connected with the person or the people that you've spoken to, just to let them know that you're around, you're still interested in the program. Continue to ask good questions. If you want to meet faculty or staff or students or alumni, these are all things you can do. If you're truly interested in doing that, I think these are all ways to help sort of enrich that process pre-MBA, or at least pre-admission, which can only strengthen one's experience throughout the program.
I think there are some great tips there. So definitely rewind the podcast and listen to that part as well. So in terms of the GMAT, I know you mentioned GMAT and GPA are often maybe the third and fourth things you look at. But is there, say, a minimum quantitative or verbal percentage or GPA that sort of starts to ring alarm bells that candidates should be aware of, trying to get above a certain score?
Yeah, I think what I'll say is sort of with our typical range, and we were clear, is that 550 is sort of the minimum in terms of what we're looking at. But we also want to see students who are somewhat balanced in both aspects. And, there's actually 4 aspects, but when you think about sort of the verbal and the quantitative, you want to sort of be at least at that mid-level to be doing well. I mean, you don't want to have a student, or you don't want to be a student who has 90th percentile in quantitative, but the verbal is, very weak in the 10th percentile, or vice versa. You have to try to be balanced somewhere, sort of balanced or higher. So at least at the minimum, sort of in that 50th percentile, if you can. Yeah. But we realize that, for depending on the countries and depending on one's experience, sometimes standardized tests are not the norm. And so, that's why grades are also another aspect, another great way for us to understand, the academic ability for a student. So the GMAT is one aspect, but it's not the only way to distinguish one candidate from another. But it's one way that we look at. It's one of the tools. But of course, the grades matter as well. And, looking at sort of a B plus average or higher, or a B average or higher, I should say, is really quite is the minimum. And I say as a minimum, but that's not, again, meeting the basic criteria does not guarantee admission to the program. So
right.
There's still many things that are looked at outside that.
It's very clear. And do you have any last tips that you can give our listeners on how they could improve their chances of admission?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said with the GMAT piece, or sort of as I said before, like just with doing the research, you've got to research. And I said initially about researching the school, but it's also good to do the research in terms of why you want to do the MBA. Often it sounds like a great concept. It's a great idea, but it's one of the biggest investments a student is going to make his or lifetime. And unlike a house or a car that you can sell at some point, you can't sell your MBA. So once you've got it, and it's stuck to you, but it's something that's going to be with you for a very long time. So if you come into the program and you're not entirely sure why you're doing the MBA, it might be better to just take some time and figure out those questions, or at least ask those questions. We're not expecting that somebody has to know exactly the career plan, but if you're going to invest, $60,000 to $75,000 in a program over a 2-year span, you have to be at least prepared to at least ask those questions on your own. And we do have a career office, a career development center that will help you answer some of those questions. And for often enough, the first year of the MBA is dedicated to helping students answer those types of questions and figure those things out. But you really should at least have some sort of a vision or a goal or a wish list of what you'd like to do post MBA prior to starting. Just otherwise, it's not just a academic exercise.
Yeah, and I guess one question I forgot to ask is it, do candidates have a better chance if they apply in the earlier deadlines as opposed to the final deadlines?
The only thing that's a better chance is that if you apply in the final but if you apply within the deadline period, you're okay. Okay. I think in the sense that if you meet the requirements and if students, demonstrate sort of the requirements and a strong interview then they're likely going to be competitive for admission to the program. What happens though is sometimes for scholarships, there can be some. There might be limited scholarships. We don't offer all our scholarships in the very early part of the process, but some scholarships are given out. But if students wish to apply later by April, and if sometimes in some cases people will ask, can they apply in May or June? If there are seats in the program, you take it. You take that chance, and of course we'll be happy to invite that application. Of course, but on the other hand, if for some reason if the seats are full, we would obviously look at considering the applicant for a January entry point. So if somebody applies for September and there are no seats in the September intake, the January intake is always a possibility as well.
Got it. Great. And in terms of your scholarships, could you let us know what percentage of your class gets scholarships and what your average scholarship amounts are?
Yeah, I think scholarships and bursaries and sort of financial aid is a big part of the experience in terms of it's a question of first is how do I need to do an MBA, and then the second point once you figure it out, yes, I'd like to do the MBA, is how am I going to afford this? We at Schulich we actually have a financial aid office, and financial aid office will take care of the scholarships as well as the bursaries and support for students continuing through the MBA program. So it's a little different because many schools will sort of offer a lot of the scholarship money sort of upfront. What we try to do is we try to offer some of it upfront, but we also try to offer funding and support throughout the program. So the student is able to manage through the program successfully, not only from an academic standpoint, but just from a survival standpoint in completing the program in that sense. So the question of the percentage, we do have, I would say it's about 20% to 30% of students will receive some of our, the bigger scholarships. But, we have bursaries and financial aid. And so it can end up that sort of between 80 to 90% of the students could qualify for some sort of financial aid support when coming into the program. So I think that's probably an important thing for people to understand, just because there is support available. It's important, again, though, there's an essay question where we ask students to fill out regarding the scholarship, if there's anything extra that they've done outside, again, their work, to talk about that in the application at some point, because that's going to signal to the admissions committee that you are a strong candidate for a scholarship.
So it sounds like in terms of hopefully getting a chance at some of your bigger scholarships, that 20, 30% that you mentioned, that you really need to show how you're going to contribute to your class. And I'm guessing you need to be academically strong as well. I mean, would that be fair?
Academics goes without saying. I think when you come to Schulich, every student, and you only realize this after you graduate, but every student is a top student. But it's the extracurriculars that are really important. It's what makes you, get up in the morning to go to work, and what makes you also get up in the weekends and enjoy your weekends. And what do you do for fun, and what makes you a more sort of an enriched individual? I think those are the things that are really important when we're looking at it, when we're looking at the scholarship process. So what happens is, the admissions committee, again, once we've made a decision, we will have to take the file forward to a scholarship committee for further review. And then at that point, we have to present a specific students' files to this committee for review. And we can obviously offer scholarships to every single student in the program, but the top students will receive some sort of scholarship.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to link to your scholarship page in the show notes of this episode, so our listeners can see, your entrance scholarships, your continuing scholarships, and so forth. But in terms of loans, are international students able to apply for loans in Canada? Yes,
believe it or not, this is something very new here at Schulich that we're offering we are offering over the past year, and that is we have a new loan program. And so
great.
What it is students can qualify depending, now it's not every single student, but there's a select group of students that will be reviewed, and we have a partnership agreement with a Canadian bank, and they will look at the student's profile, and they will offer them loan, an international, it's a line of credit actually, where the rate or the interest rate will be at prime plus 0.5%. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
again, it's on our website. I'm more than, I would recommend maybe to include a link there as well to that as well.
Great. Fantastic. And then in terms of careers, the big question, saving it for last. How, I guess, first of all, for some of our listeners who have never lived in Canada, how are MBAs viewed in Canada? Because, it seems to be different country to country. I know it's a general question, but, is it similar to how, for example, MBAs are perhaps viewed in the US? Or is it a bit different?
I guess I would say that, in Canada, the market is, it's a smaller population, but it's interesting because, I mentioned this at the beginning, is that we have students from various backgrounds and coming from, whether you're coming from sort of a marketing background or finance or consulting, or if you're coming from an area like the arts and media or not-for-profit, the benefit is that an MBA is valued in all of these sectors. And so if you have an MBA, I think the value is that you're able to work in almost any sector you'd like to work. And the benefit at Schulich is that you're able to take some courses and get some knowledge in that industry. So, we have a mining sector, we have a healthcare sector. So any of these areas, an MBA is going to be, obviously recognized and sort of rewarded to come, to return to that sector or to transition into a new sector that may not be sort of your traditional sectors that many business schools may sort of focus their attention to, that being sort of finance or consulting, which not to say we don't have that, but it's just to say that we do have many areas and a lot of niche areas as well. And, from a placement standpoint, 90% of our students at least will find a job within 3 months of graduation. The average salary is about $92,000 to $93,000. So there is definitely value. Our MBAs are being placed, and I think the sectors that they're being placed sort of range from, as I said, the finance to marketing to consulting to the niche areas like healthcare or arts and media or social sector management as well.
So can you highlight any unique ways your career services helps students find jobs?
Yeah, at Schulich, one of the interesting things we have industry experts. So we have, obviously, with 19 specializations, you need to have people who are experts in these different industries. Obviously from a faculty standpoint, from an academic standpoint, but from a career placement and career piece, we have professionals who will help students, and these professionals or these experts have actually worked in the industry, and they are now working at Schulich and then advising and working with students from the time of admission throughout until they graduate. And interesting enough, once the student graduates, there is also an alumni support person who works with alumni, whether it's 5 years after you graduate or 10 years after you graduate. Should you experience a career transition or look for different things to do, you have access to the career center throughout your professional career.
Yeah, and Praveen, as someone who has gone through the program himself, would you have any tips for our listeners on how they can make the most out of their time in Schulich to get the sorts of jobs that they want or are targeting? Yeah. Would you have any advice there, having seen your classmates do it and your students do it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned while I went through the program, I think this is one of the best pieces of advice that somebody gave me when I started the program. And this is somebody who was not a Schulich student, but had finished his MBA. And actually, I think he went to an American school. And he told me this. He said, the toughest thing about the MBA is finding time to go to class. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? And I didn't understand that. And I realized afterwards when I came here at Schulich, located in Toronto, we have access to many, many, many recruiters. And so as a result, there's always information sessions scheduled. There's 3, 4, 5 information sessions scheduled throughout the day and evenings, sort of from September through to December. And then again, in the spring, there are many more information sessions. So and recruiters are coming on campus to hire our MBA students and IMBA students as well. So the thing that I would say or recommend for anybody interested in looking to get their dream job, because I think at the end of the day, it's ideal to to get that, or to be at least set on the path to get that, is you need to talk to as many people as you can. And so that networking aspect of the MBA is something that one should not discount or not forget about. And I think connecting with the Career Center early is important. Identifying your goals, understanding what you'd like to do, whether it's 1 year after your MBA, 3 years after your MBA, or 10 years. You need to have a plan or a map so you know how to get there. And speaking with the Career Center was one way. Speaking with faculty, many of the people who teach are not only scholars, but some of them are from the industry. So taking advantage of, their network and their experience is also very helpful. And the most important group, well, there's a couple more, is the alumni. And I think it's connecting with alumni, people who have gone through the program and are in jobs that you see that you'd like to ideally work in are key as well. And, it's not about necessarily trying to get a job right away from an alum, but it's just maybe setting up an informational interview and just trying to find out what people do. And if that's even something that you'd like to do. And I think if you can identify some of the things you like to do, and maybe it's just 2 or 3 ideas, it really makes the MBA experience that much more enriching. And I can say that's what I did for myself. And, it's very interesting how one's career path can sort of go once you've got a plan. But if you don't have a plan, then you're not going to go anywhere.
And do you guys have a CV assessment process if someone, wants to explore whether they're a good fit for the school?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before they apply? Absolutely.
We have there's an opportunity for that to happen all the time. On our website, we have something called Schulich Connect. What that is now, I know sort of Eastern Standard Time, North America, 12 to 2 p.m. We will definitely meet with candidates via Skype or by phone or in person if they live in Toronto. And we'll be able to look at their application or look at their resume and sort of ask the right questions and figure out if a Schulich MBA is the right step for them. In addition to that, though, if students are not able to make that time or attend during those times with the time differences and so forth, we do offer opportunities. And so they can send an email to admissions@schulich.yorku.ca and we would be happy to connect.
Great. And is there anything else about the Schulich MBA that you just wish more candidates knew about?
I think sometimes the access and the ability to connect with people is something that I don't think people realize how free and how easy it is. And I think when you decide to take on the journey of the MBA, and if you decide to pursue the Schulich MBA, the access to faculty, the access to alumni, the access to current students, I think is phenomenal. And I think, it's very rare to be sitting in a classroom with people who are professionals from various disciplines. And if you're looking to work in a different industry, sometimes the person sitting next to you might be the person who helps you get there. And being open and being, sort of the culture of the classroom is that people are very collaborative in their approach. And while we do a lot of the work that's done at Schulich is through groups, you're really forced to be in a collaborative environment this way.
And to close the program, could you describe the Schulich MBA in 3 words?
I guess if I could say 3 words, I would say global, innovative, diverse. And that would be one. And I'm going to use 3 more words, and that would be your best option.
Great. Thank you so much, Praveen, for your time. I've learned so much about the Schulich MBA, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. And hopefully we can have you on the program sometime in the future as well.
Thank you. I'd love to do that anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.